Welcome back. In the last lecture, I walked you through the folder structure which was created by Create React App. And we added our app.js file here, the one h1 tag we added. Let's now dive deeper into what we see here. We see here a React component. As I explained, React is all about components, creating components, basically custom HTML element, you could say that, which you can use to construct your application. This app components actually gets in used in index.js file where you render it into this root element here. And we could render a normal HTML element here. For example, I'm going to add h1 element and typing just for the test. Now, this will work. This is now no React component. But if I save this, as I mentioned, my server is already started. So I see the h1 tag here. But of course, then we have no real React application. We are re-rendering a normal HTML element, but we are not rendering our own React component. Now you could of course use multiple React on render and render all the HTML code you want to use in your app. That's not really how you create your React apps thought. Typically, you render one root component, the app component, like this, app component, but you can name it whatever you want. One root component. In our case, it is the app component, name app, and in there you will nest all other components. Your application might need, of course, these components can then also be nested into each other. But all the way up to the top, you only have one root component. You could reach out to multiple nodes in our HTML file and mount different root components for different React apps, all in the same project. That would be possible, but it's not what we do here. In the end, you can of course simply replicate what you learn in this course for multiple applications in one of the same HTML file. But let's stick to the general or typical usage of React. We have this app component which is defined in the app.js file. Here we see one of two ways of defining a React component. We create a JavaScript class with the class keyword, and then we use the extend keyword to inherit from this component object here, or class to be precise, which is imported up here from the React library. Actually, we import two things: React, which is responsible or required for rendering anything to the DOM. We always need to import that in a file where we define a component. And of course, the component class itself. I will soon show you a different way of creating component thought. Now this class has one method, the render method. It needs to have that because React will call this method to render something to the screen. This is one important job every React component has to do. It has to return some HTML code which can be rendered to the DOM, to the screen. You can do other things in there too. Reach out to the internet, do some calculation, listen to events, whatever you need in your application. We will see all of that in codes, but you always also need to render some HTML to the DOM. It is so important, keep in mind. We then export this app class as the default export of this file. This is an ES6 feature and simply means if you import this whole file, you will simply import this class because it's a default export. We do use in the index.js file where we import app from the app file, again omitting this extension because it's added by our build workflow automatically for JavaScript files. This app name here, the way is chosen arbitrarily, but typically you use the name of the component you also use in the file, and then you also use as a file name. One side note, you might also see those component with JSX as a file extension instead of JS. The reason for this code is here. I refer to it as HTML, which is return, but in the end this is not HTML. It's look like it is, but the JSX, it is a JavaScript looking but a bit different, and this can be confusing at first when you are learning React. This might be one of the most confusing things actually. Important to know is this is just some synthetical sugar it was. Basically invented by React team, and we can write it in our JavaScript file because of the build workflow we are using here. It will basically automatically transfer it to valid JavaScript in the end. It's not connected to the file extension you are using. It works in JS and JSX file and the convention. Nowadays, it's pretty much to always use .js file, which is why we do it here too. And it simply is code or syntax we can use to write HTML in quotation marks will list in the end. Not writing it sounds confusing. Let me show you what this actually is compiled to in the next lecture.